Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Cahow, and I will be presenting on Chapter 1, The Coercive World in Coercion and Its Fallout by Marie Sidman. Sidman begins Chapter 1 with various examples of coercion that occur in the world every day. Coercion is all around us, whether it is in the government, or police enforcing laws, a landlord demanding rent, or else eviction, eating one's veggies, or else no dessert. All of these are forms of coercion, and I don't know about you, but I've heard a ton of the do this or else throughout my life, and I'm only 23. As a kid, my parents used to say, don't curse or else you'll get hot sauce on your tongue. This backfired when my brother and I ended up actually liking the hot sauce. The point is, like Sidman notes, coercion is all around us, and sometimes we engage in it without even realizing we're doing so. He goes on to talk about coercion and compares it to good advice and how sometimes this good advice could be seen as a good thing, but actually it can be coercive. Like saying someone bring an umbrella to avoid getting wet can actually be taken as a negative manner. And this was really interesting to me because I always thought of myself as being good at giving advice and or reminding myself or others for things. But then I think now it's like, I don't mean to be coercive every time I'm doing that. In the case of physicians and warnings against smoking cigarettes, doctors often use threats or phrases like quit smoking or else you'll end up with cancer and die, which often leads to individuals actually avoiding those doctors who gave them this information. Sidman discusses how telling patients what they should do, as opposed to what they should not do, can actually increase the chances of meeting the desired goal. In the case of the physician, maybe telling the patient to make sure they're exercising, as opposed to just saying stop smoking, can produce better results in terms of health. Humans react to coercion by either escaping or avoiding. So in this chapter of the Coercive World, Sidman divides the chapter into the hostile environment and the hostile community. And so we will start with the hostile environment on page 18. Sidman notes that humans' first interactions with coercion are from the physical environment, which is also nature. So things like the cold, heat, rain, wind, snow, flood, earthquake, fire. All of these are examples of how the surrounding environment, the physical environment, impacts our lives. I thought it was an interesting point that Sidman says we're always defending ourselves against the environment. Because for me personally, I'm always cold, but somehow not anemic, which still doesn't make sense to me. But I always try to be prepared by having a jacket with me, sometimes even a blanket. Like I've definitely brought a blanket with me to the movie theaters before, or even things like bringing a rain jacket just if there's the slightest chance of rain. I always considered myself being prepared for the situation. But Sidman has pointed out that I am actually simply defending myself from the physical environment, which again I thought was pretty interesting. So while we cannot attribute, intent to nature, because it's not a living thing, it's impersonable, our past experiences show us that we need to take precautions if the physical environment sends us warning signs. So as humans, we defend ourselves against the natural environment by creating shelters, gathering and storing food, or in some cases, constructing dams. The natural environment is limited to a certain number of fossil fuels, which is a threat or coercion to humankind. Our internal environment is also a source of coercion in terms of illness and death. If we do not properly care for our bodies, they can and will get sick. And so to combat this threat, humans have created the medical community, and it has flourished. Even things like trying to slow down our natural aging process, that has grown a lot over the past couple decades. So I thought it was interesting how Sidman pointed out that we are creating answers to the coercion that nature's throwing at us. do we know if this in fact is creating more future threats? So we don't know for sure, but it definitely seems that it is generating more threats. So it's kind of ironic trying to combat the issue and just creating more problems in the long run. But we as humans are doing our best to protect ourselves from the physical environment's coercion. And even though we do our best, we're reminded through catastrophic events that nature is still hostile and a lot stronger than us, and essentially cannot be controlled. So things like hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, volcanic eruptions, and floods, those are all examples of natural disasters that can affect us. However, humans have been known to attribute these to acts of God or any sort of higher being in which someone looks up to, or they just in general have the attitude that that's life. And Sidman pointed out that by accepting these events, we're actually blinding ourselves to the coercive character that nature truly is. So it's just kind of an ongoing cycle, circular cycle with nature, and us avoiding that coercion. So Sidman discusses how environmental coercion has actually moved over into our language. So some of the examples that I had heard before that Sidman noted were starved for affection, thirsting for knowledge, burning with passion, an idea flashed through my head. Sidman notes that the television industry is a tool for notifying us humans about these catastrophic events, and it is true that we get a lot of our information from the media, specifically weather information from meteorologists. The section on the hostile environment ends with a powerful quote, in my opinion. In spite of our wistful assumption of supremacy, we remain subservient to nature even during the leisure. We are little humans on a big planet in a huge solar system, so it only makes sense that we do what we can to be prepared for the impacts of our natural environment. Sidman then goes on to discuss the hostile community, where he focuses on social coercion, which he says has been accepted as natural. So this includes anything like punishment techniques in the teaching world for those with disabilities, bolting doors to avoid intruders, securing purses to avoid theft, locking one's car to avoid a break-in, not walking after dark in the Boston Common to avoid getting mugged or raped. An extreme form of social coercion is terrorism. In the educational system, teachers often threaten students with failing grades if they do not complete the work that is assigned to them. We need to praise the successful learning and work that is completed. Unfortunately, that is not how the current system operates. As a country, we threaten war. Sidman made an excellent point, in my opinion, how our society denies certain employment, experiences, and benefits to those who suffer from illnesses. There is such a stigma around those with illnesses as well as those with disabilities. We experience coercion every day, if not then almost every day, in our social environment. The media is constantly sharing stories on different types of abuse between family members or spouses or children. It's everywhere. Sidman discusses how we as humans have this expectation to be threatened, pushed around, or warned by those around us. We experience coercion all the time through punishment, deprivation, or loss, as these are standard practice in the workplace and classroom. In the workplace, bad work is criticized, good work is ignored. In school, good grades are praised for the avoidance of low grades. Society punishes crimes. Families, dad or mom might be the boss. My sister-in-law uses coercion all the time with my 3.5-year-old niece, now that I think about it. Whenever we're at my dad and stepmom's for dinner, my niece never wants to eat dinner, and it'll always be, Savannah, you better eat your dinner or else you get no dessert tonight. And it almost always works, so my sister is reinforced for her coercive tendencies, so I'm eager to share this new knowledge with her for sure. Sidman made a point about peer pressure and the threat of being left out that many teenagers face in the wake of trying new substances or experimenting with sex. Both environmental coercion and social coercion happen all the time, and Sidman points out that we find it hard to imagine life without it. Sidman then goes on to discuss freedom and how this is a cherished value, and I thought it was pretty interesting how Skinner points out that freedom came about through humans actually enslaving each other. Like, if there would have never been humans punishing each other, depriving each other, restricting each other from things, there would have already been this sense of freedom, and there never would have been a need to try to find that freedom. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Overall, many people, myself included, underestimate the amount of coercion that occurs. Sidman points out that some practitioners even engage in aversive therapy, and while he does not condone this, it is still prevalent. Aversive therapy also does not bring anything new to the table because coercive tendencies have been around for centuries. Sidman believes it is wrong to not bring any new information because science has made it possible for us to be and do better. I agree that behavior analysis can and should be used to help us battle this epidemic of coercion. So my questions are, have you or someone you know ever experienced an act of coercion? And if so, what happened? If you had a favorite or most interesting part of this chapter, what was it? Thank you for listening and reading along. Have a good night.